A Relic to Die For by Richard Houston. Fred followed me like a blind puppy. He was bound to bruise his nose if I made a sudden stop. Fred is neither a puppy nor is he blind. Like me, he was scared. I didn't believe in zombies or ghosts, and I'd be willing to bet my next paycheck, if I ever got a next paycheck, that Fred didn't either. Still, I couldn't get them out of my mind as we crept through the abandoned cemetery, looking for Captain Howard Scott's grave. The urge to give it up and go home was overruled by the need to pay my bills and feed a dog who ate more than I did. I'd been hired by Margaret Scott to find the captain's grave and see if it had been robbed. Margaret was the wife of the captain's great-great-grandson and the twin sister of my good friend and neighbor, Bonnie Jones. Margaret's son had seen a Confederate officer's sword for sale on eBay, with the family name inscribed on it. The listing was deleted when he sent an email asking the seller how he got the sword, but not before he managed to download pictures of it. When he showed them to Margaret, she recognized it as the sword of her husband's great-great-grandfather from an ancient tintype. She remembered stories of how he had been buried in full uniform along with his sword on the family homestead in southern Missouri. The current owner of the farm refused to let the sheriffs on his property without a warrant, so I was hired to do the job. We had looked at a dozen headstones when Fred left my heels to check out a small grave with a weathered stone. Although the moon was nearly full, a cloud chose the moment to block its light. I used my flashlight to read the weather-worn epitaph. God needed a special angel, one loving and kind, and so he chose our child and left us all behind. I couldn't read any more and bent down to hug Fred around the neck. I knew dogs have excellent night vision, but there was no way he could have known the grave was that of a child. Dogs can't read. I wiped my eyes and whispered, even though the nearest house was over 200 yards away. You need glasses, Freddie. Sarah isn't even close to Howard. Fred raised his head and pointed in the direction of the adjacent grave. I didn't need my flashlight to read the name. The weather-worn stone was barely legible. I couldn't read the epitaph, but the name Howard Scott had been carved deeply enough to last 150 years of Missouri ice and wind. I patted Fred on the head and got up to inspect the captain's last resting place. The dirt around his grave was covered with the same wild grass and weeds of all the others and didn't look like it had been disturbed. There was even a small cedar tree of 5 or 6 feet that had taken root in the center of his grave. The tree was at least 3 or 4 years old. I suppose Howard's grave could have been dug up before the tree took root, but why would the robber wait till so long to sell his loot? It was a question I wouldn't have time to ponder. Fred started to growl, looking toward the farmhouse. I turned to look and froze. Several exterior floodlights had the yard lit up like a high school football field. The light beams didn't reach us, but it wouldn't be long before the light of a powerful flashlight coming toward us did. I turned off my flashlight and headed for the road, praying we could get to a small shack a few yards beyond the fence of the cemetery before the farmer could see us. The old shed should shield us from any gunshot long enough for us to reach Bonnie's Jeep and escape. I was just yards from the fence when I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. A second later, I landed flat on my back, knocking the air out of my lungs. The hole I hadn't seen was more than 5 or 6 feet deep, that I could estimate from Fred's presence at the top of the pit. He stood at the rim, barking for me to get my fat butt up before the farmer could catch us, or at least that's what I thought he was trying to tell me. For all I knew, he could have been laughing his head off. My flashlight had gone flying when I fallen. The light from the moon was no help in the darkness of the hole, so I felt around for my flashlight, and my hand bumped up against a soft object in the process. I didn't need light from the moon or otherwise to tell me it was a body. I'm sure if the Olympics had a jumping out of a pit event, I would win gold. I was out of the hole and over the cemetery fence in record time. We didn't stop for breath until we were within sight of Bonnie's Jeep, with only the shed between us and the cemetery. A second later we heard a gunshot. I still didn't believe in zombies, despite my encounter with what must have been a corpse, so it had to be the farmer. He let loose 5 or 6 rounds in rapid succession. Less than a minute later we were in the jeep, spraying gravel from all 4 wheels.